Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Fears family. Tonight, we journey far from the warmth of home into the frozen, isolated corners of Alaska, where small towns hide secrets so chilling, they'll freeze your very soul. Imagine waking up to footprints in your yard, leading straight to the woods, only to discover you live alone. That's the kind of terror we'll uncover tonight. In this video, we'll reveal 10 of the most disturbing true horror stories from Alaskan's small town. Tales of eerie disappearances, unexplained sightings, and chilling encounters that the locals still whisper about, even decades later. Each story comes straight from someone who lived it, told in their own words, and each one leaves behind a lingering question you won't soon forget. So, as the Arctic wind howls outside your window, ask yourself, what really lurks in the shadows of these frozen towns? Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell, because once you start, there's no turning back. My name is Daniel, and this happened when I was working as a forest ranger in a tiny Alaskan town called Frostbite Creek. The town was so small that everyone knew everyone else, or at least they thought they did. Winters were brutal, nights endless, and the dark seemed to stretch forever over the snow-covered wilderness. It started with a missing hiker report. A young woman named Emily hadn't returned from a solo trek near the old logging trails. I volunteered to help with the search, even though I'd heard the old stories. People disappearing in these woods without a trace, leaving nothing but eerie footprints in the snow. The first night, I camped near the edge of the forest, listening to the wind whistle through skeletal trees. Something moved in the shadows, just at the edge of my firelight. I told myself it was probably a fox or a moose. But the footprints I saw in the snow the next morning didn't match any animal. They were human, and led straight into the frozen river, stopping abruptly as if whoever made them had vanished into thin air. I followed the frozen trail deeper into the forest. The snow crunched under my boots, echoing in the still, bitter cold. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though every time I turned, there was nothing but shadows and frost-covered pines. As I reached an abandoned cabin, half buried in snow, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I didn't remember it being on the map. Inside, the air was thick, smelling of decay and old smoke. On the floor, scratched into the frost covering the wooden planks, were symbols I didn't understand. Circles and lines that seemed almost ritualistic. A sudden crash from the woods outside made me jump. My flashlight caught movement, a fleeting shadow darting between the trees. I called out Emily's name, my voice swallowed by the icy wind. Silence answered. Then, faintly, I thought I heard whispering, words I couldn't make out, coming from deep within the forest. I wanted to leave, but some force, I don't know what, pulled me toward the trail. It was as if the woods themselves were alive, drawing me closer to where Emily had vanished. The next day, I found Emily's backpack half buried in snow, snagged on a branch near a frozen creek. Her map and journal were inside, but the entries ended abruptly, mid-sentence. One line caught my eye. Something watches me. It knows where I'm going. I followed the creek upstream, the trail narrowing between jagged ice formations. Then I saw it. Tracks not just human, but distorted, elongated, and strangely deep, like someone, or something, was taller than any human could be. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. Night fell fast in Alaska. I set up another camp, but sleep didn't come. Every snapping twig, every rustle of the wind through the trees sounded like footsteps circling me. Around midnight, I heard a scraping noise at the edge of my firelight. Soft, deliberate, almost intelligent. I I shined my flashlight and saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line. Tall, shadowy, its face obscured by darkness. Before I could react, it vanished into the swirling snowstorm. I felt icy fingers brush my spine, though no one was there. Morning brought no relief. The snow had covered most tracks, but I found tiny signs, broken twigs, deep depressions, leading me to an old, rusted mine shaft. The locals said it had been abandoned for decades. They also said no one went near it after dark. I felt a mix of dread and duty. I couldn't stop now. Emily's life depended on me. Carefully, I shone my flashlight into the mine. Inside, the walls were scratched with symbols like the ones I'd seen in the cabin. Something had been here recently. Then I heard it. Low, guttural breathing, echoing from deep within the shaft. I called Emily's name, voice trembling. Silence. Then, a whisper. You shouldn't be here. The sound didn't belong to any human voice I knew. I almost turned back. Almost. But curiosity and fear pushed me forward. Each step felt heavier, the air colder, as if the mine itself exhaled frost. I couldn't see far, only shadows dancing on the walls. But I could hear movement ahead, slow, deliberate, stalking. Something waited for me deep inside. Deeper in the mine, the temperature plummeted, my breath misting before me. I noticed strange markings on the walls, handprints, claw-like scratches, almost desperate in tone. The air was heavy with a metallic tang, like blood frozen in time. Suddenly, I stumbled into a cavernous room, and there she was. Emily, kneeling on the cold stone floor, her eyes wide, unblinking, staring at a black shape curling in the shadows. She didn't move or respond when I called her name. I stepped closer, and the shadow turned. Not human. Limbs too long, movements unnatural. Its face was a blur, a shifting mass of darkness, eyes glowing faintly red. I froze, my heart pounding. The thing hissed, a sound that made the walls vibrate. Emily whispered, almost in a trance, "It's not human. It's always been here." The figure advanced slowly, each step making the floor groan. I realized we weren't alone. The entire mine seemed alive, watching, breathing, waiting. I grabbed Emily's arm, trying to pull her away. The shadow hissed louder, and a cold wind whipped through the cavern, extinguishing my flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. Panic surged. I fumbled for matches, heart racing, and lit a small flare. The figure recoiled briefly at the flare's light, but didn't retreat. Its elongated limbs seemed to bend unnaturally. Emily screamed, not in fear, but as if the sound came from somewhere inside the shadow itself. I realized then that the mine was a trap, a place where reality bent. The shadows clung to the walls, reaching, whispering, crawling. I dragged Emily toward the shaft entrance, stumbling over jagged rocks and broken beams. Halfway out, the wind died suddenly. Silence pressed in, heavier than the snow outside. Then, the footprints that led us here, human-shaped, elongated, monstrous, appeared in front of us again, leading us back inside. I didn't look back. I ran, and Emily followed, her screams fading into the darkness behind us. Whatever lived here didn't chase us openly. It was patient, lurking, knowing we would always remember. We finally emerged into the cold night. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a crisp, frozen landscape. Frostbite Creek looked peaceful, almost ordinary. But I knew the truth. Something lurked beneath in the dark veins of the forest, waiting for the next wanderer. Emily was silent, shaking, unable to speak. Her journal fell from her hands, pages fluttering in the wind. On the last page she had written, "It watches through the snow, counting. I can feel it in my dreams." don't go near Frostbite Creek. The townspeople tried to convince us it was a hallucination, exhaustion, fear. But I had seen the tracks. I had heard the whispers. And at night, when the wind blows across the frozen river, I swear I see figures in the snow, watching, waiting. That's when I realized the forest itself had memories. It remembered every disappearance, every fear, every secret. And it would claim anyone foolish enough to wander too close to its heart. We left Frostbite Creek soon after, but I returned sometimes, not willingly. But I cannot resist the pull of what lingers in the shadows. Weeks later, I returned alone, compelled by something I couldn't explain. The mine entrance was buried under fresh snow, as if it had never existed. No tracks, no sign of Emily, or of the shadowy figure. I called her name, my voice swallowed by the forest. Only silence replied. The air was still, almost too still. And then, faintly, a scratching sound, rhythmic, coming from beneath the snow. I knelt down, brushing away the top layer. Etched into the ice were footprints, not human, not animal. A trail leading deeper into the forest, perfectly straight, unwavering, as if whatever made them had no fear, no hesitation, and no intention of returning. A sudden gust of wind whispered through the pines, carrying a voice I will never forget. You shouldn't have come back. My heart froze. I realized some doors, once opened, never truly close. And some secrets of Frostbite Creek are meant to remain buried beneath the ice, forever. Emily never spoke of what she saw, not fully. Sometimes at night, she would wake screaming, pointing at corners of the room where nothing was visible. The townspeople whispered that the forest had claimed her in a way no one could explain. I stayed behind to investigate, documenting the forest and its paths, hoping to understand the patterns of disappearance. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. The trails, the symbols, even the wind itself. Everything seemed to move with intention. The forest was alive, not with animals, but with something ancient, patient, and malevolent. I mapped the mine, the creek, the surrounding trails. Every disappearance followed a pattern. Human footprints merging with something else, leaving nothing behind. And every trail led back to the mine, now buried, waiting for the next victim foolish enough to wander in. At night, I dream of the shadows. They whisper names, including mine, across the frozen landscape. Frostbite Creek is not just a town. It's a trap. And the trap remembers. I left Frostbite Creek for good after that winter, but I still hear about new disappearances. Tourists, hikers, even locals vanish without a trace. The stories always begin the same way. Footprints, whispers, shadows moving just beyond the light. I warn anyone who asks. Do not go near Frostbite Creek after dark. The forest does not forgive, and it does not forget. It waits patiently beneath snow, beneath ice, beneath the quiet of a small town that pretends nothing is wrong. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see Emily kneeling in that cavern, her eyes wide with fear, the shadow looming behind her. I see the footprints reappearing, leading into the mine, into the darkness, into the unknown. And I know one thing. The forest remembers everyone. One day, it will remember me again. Some secrets are not meant to be uncovered. Some towns are not meant to be visited. And some shadows are never meant to be seen. My name is Lisa, and this happened the winter I moved to a tiny Alaskan town called Midnight Lake. I had relocated there for work at the local general store, hoping for peace and solitude. But what I found was far from peaceful. The town was surrounded by frozen lakes and dense pine forests. Locals were friendly but reserved, and they warned me repeatedly about the howlings at night. I laughed it off as superstition until the first night I spent alone in my cabin. At exactly midnight, I awoke to a sound that froze me in place. A long, drawn-out howl echoing across the frozen lake. It wasn't a wolf or any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded human, twisted, and full of anguish, like someone or something was calling for help or warning me. I wrapped myself in blankets, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. But the howling continued, circling the lake, shifting in pitch and tone as if the sound itself was moving closer to my cabin. Somewhere deep inside, I felt it wasn't alone. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and learning my name. I tried to ignore the sound, burying myself under thick blankets, but sleep was impossible. The howling changed. It became rhythmic, almost like footsteps, pacing the frozen lake. I peeked out the window and saw nothing but snow, trees, and darkness. The next morning, I discovered strange marks in the snow. They weren't animal tracks. They were elongated, claw-like, and moved toward the forest before stopping abruptly. I told myself it was a prank, though no one lived nearby. That night, the howling returned, louder, closer. I heard scratching on my cabin walls, soft at first, then insistent, as if someone or something was circling me. The shadows outside twisted unnaturally in the moonlight, and I began to feel like the forest itself was alive, studying me. I took a flashlight and ventured toward the lake, drawn by a strange compulsion. The howls stopped the moment I stepped onto the ice, leaving an eerie silence so deep it pressed against my chest. Then I saw it. A figure crouched at the edge, black and humanoid, staring at me with glowing eyes. I froze. The figure didn't move, but I felt its gaze like a weight on my soul. The air around me became bitterly cold, and I noticed frost forming unnaturally fast on my clothes. I whispered, "Who's there?" But only my breath responded. Then a voice, a whisper, barely audible, slithered through the wind. "You shouldn't be here." My heart raced. Something about the voice was wrong, unhuman, yet familiar, like echoes of the forest itself speaking. I stumbled backward, nearly falling on the ice. The figure disappeared, melting into shadows. But I could feel it circling, stalking me. I ran back to the cabin and bolted the door, but the howling returned, now inside my head as well as outside. Sleep was impossible. Every shadow in my cabin twisted. Every floorboard creak became a threat. I knew then that the thing wanted me to hear it, to feel it, to fear it, deeply, completely. By dawn, I was exhausted, shaking, and certain the creature had been in the cabin while I slept, studying me in silence. I went to the townspeople for help, but their eyes went wide with fear when I mentioned the howling. They told me old stories. Disappearances every decade, all near the lake. Everyone knew the lake was cursed, but no one spoke openly, and outsiders were warned away. Ignoring their warnings only made me more curious. That night, I decided to record the sound of the howling. I set up cameras and microphones facing the lake, then went to bed, though sleep was a distant memory. Around midnight, the howling started again. Louder, agonizing, sorrowful. But this time, I could make out more. Words in the wind, phrases like, "Come closer, join us." I grabbed my camera and flashlight and stepped onto the ice. The sound surrounded me, echoing from the frozen lake and forests beyond. My flashlight illuminated shapes, Dozens of black humanoid figures crouched at the tree line, their glowing eyes fixed on me, unmoving. They didn't run when I approached. They didn't blink. They just waited. I froze in terror. My camera slipped from my hand, clattering across the ice. One of the figures moved, slowly, unnaturally, gliding across the ice toward me. Each step left no mark, yet the snow around it shimmered with frost like it had been touched by fire. The howling reached a deafening crescendo, echoing across the frozen landscape. I could feel it vibrating in my chest. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to obey. Suddenly, I heard another sound. A soft, familiar voice calling my name. It was my reflection? No. It was Emily, the woman who had disappeared decades ago in the town. Her ghostly figure appeared atop the ice, distorted and transparent, pointing toward the forest. The figure approached, slower than time, and I realized the howls were not just sounds. They were warnings, memories, echoes of everyone the lake had claimed. I ran. I didn't look back. The ice cracked beneath me, and I barely made it to the shore. Behind me, the howling faded into silence. But the sense of being watched never left. Back in my cabin, I reviewed the footage. The camera had captured dozens of shadowy humanoids emerging from the forest, moving in impossible ways, their eyes glowing faint red. Emily's apparition appeared briefly, pointing, then vanished. The townspeople warned me again. They told me the lake remembers, and it collects souls, whispers to them, and waits for new visitors to draw into its cycle. They spoke of rituals, of sacrifices that never reached human memory, but left marks in the ice. I could no longer ignore it. Every night after, I would hear faint howls echoing from the lake, calling my name, reminding me I was not alone. The figures never came into the town, but they didn't have to. The fear, the awareness, the knowledge of their existence was enough to keep me awake, alert, paranoid. Sometimes, I see shapes at the edge of the lake when I walk nearby in daylight. Shadows that vanish when approached, leaving only disturbed snow and ice behind. The lake watches. The lake waits. One evening, I decided to confront it. I walked onto the frozen lake, camera in hand, the air sharp and biting. The wind carried whispers, unintelligible but urgent, circling me. Then I saw them. Dozens of shadowy figures crouched on the ice, staring. Their glowing eyes followed every step. I called out, demanding they leave me alone. The wind screamed in response, as if mocking me. A figure approached slowly, its form shifting like smoke. Then, Emily's apparition appeared, closer now, whispering, "Don't trust the silence. Don't stay after dark." The lake takes what it wants. I turned back to the town, running, never glancing at the ice. My boots left prints in the snow, but I knew they would vanish overnight, just like the others, leaving only the echo of howls in my mind. I never stopped hearing it, no matter how far I went. Midnight Lake's whispers follow me even today, reminding me that some places are alive in ways we cannot understand. Weeks later, I returned for evidence, hoping to understand or document it scientifically. The lake was silent. The snow was untouched, and no tracks remained from my previous encounter. I set up recording equipment again and waited until midnight. At precisely 12, the howls returned, not from the lake, but from inside my cabin. The walls shook, the windows rattled, and a voice whispered my name from the darkness. Panicked, I ran outside. Across the frozen lake, figures emerged, dozens, hovering above the ice as though walking on air. Their eyes glowed red, reflecting in the moonlight. Emily's apparition appeared once more, beckoning me to leave. The next morning, I found my footprints gone, The snow was pristine. The recordings were blank. Nothing remained, except a lingering sense that the lake knew I had been there, watching, waiting, and learning. I realized that some places in Alaska are alive, not with wildlife, but with ancient, patient forces, keeping records of the living and the dead. And I had trespassed. I tried to warn newcomers, but few believed me. They laughed off my stories until they disappeared. The howls returned at night in their cabins, echoing across the frozen landscape. Some were found days later, wandering the woods, blank-eyed, unable to speak, muttering about shadows and voices. I never stayed past midnight in that town again. Every sound, every whisper, every shadow reminded me that the lake is sentient. It knows who approaches, who fears, who leaves, and it keeps a record. Sometimes I dream of the figures, dancing silently across the ice, their glowing eyes staring into me. The whispers follow me, trailing in the wind, reminding me that the lake... I finally left Midnight Lake for good, though the memories never left. I never returned, but I monitor the town from afar. Every few years, a new disappearance makes the local news. Tourists, hikers, newcomers, all vanish, leaving only whispers and footprints that appear and vanish without explanation. The town pretends it's normal. The lake pretends to be frozen water. But I know the truth. The lake is alive. It remembers every person who ever dared to wander its ice. And it whispers their names, collecting them in the wind. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear Emily's voice calling me back. I don't answer. Some places in Alaska are not just cold. They are hungry, patient, immortal. Midnight Lake will always remember those who cross it. And sometimes, I wonder if it is still learning my name. My name is Marcus, and this story begins the winter I was assigned to work in a tiny, isolated town called Ravens Hollow. Surrounded by dense forests and snow-capped mountains, the town felt abandoned even during the day, and at night, it became something else entirely. I had moved here for research on Alaskan wildlife, hoping for solitude, but the locals kept their distance. They whispered warnings about the Hollow, a part of the forest said to be cursed, where travelers went missing and returned only changed, if they returned at all. On my first night camping near the edge of the Hollow, I heard it. A soft whisper carried on the wind, curling around my tent, repeating words I didn't understand. At first, I thought it was the wind through the pines. But then the whispers became clearer, urgent, like someone or something was calling my name. I unzipped my tent and looked into the forest. The trees were motionless, yet I felt watched. A faint fog rose between the trunks, and I saw shadows moving unnaturally. Whatever lived in Ravens Hollow was patient, waiting, and aware of me. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the snow near my tent bore strange footprints, uneven and too large for a human, leading into the forest and stopping abruptly. I followed them cautiously, camera in hand, documenting the area. The deeper I went, the colder it became, the frost forming unnaturally thick on the trees and my clothing. The whispers returned at dusk, growing louder, repeating words I could almost understand. Leave, stay, follow. I discovered an abandoned cabin hidden beneath thick pines. The roof was caved in, windows shattered, but inside were strange etchings on the walls, symbols resembling both human and animal forms. The air inside hummed, as though the cabin itself was alive, breathing. Suddenly, a shadow darted past the broken doorway. I froze. Something, or someone, was watching, moving silently among the trees. My rational mind screamed to leave, but curiosity and the need to understand pushed me forward. I stayed near the cabin as night fell, trying to record the whispers. The forest grew unnaturally silent, the usual sounds of wildlife absent. Then, without warning, the whispering returned, closer, circling me from all directions. A cold wind ripped through the trees, carrying the faint scent of decay. My flashlight caught movement. A tall, dark figure with elongated limbs crouched between trees, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. It didn't move like a human. It shifted and flowed, blending with the shadows. The whispers coalesced into words. "You shouldn't be here. The hollow chooses." My heart raced, legs trembling. I tried to retreat, but my path seemed blocked by trees I hadn't noticed before, almost as if the forest itself was reshaping to contain me. The figure advanced slowly, then vanished into the fog. I realized this wasn't just an animal or even a human. Something ancient, malevolent, and intelligent lived here, and it knew I was trespassing. The next day, I asked the townspeople about the cabin and the hollow. They spoke hesitantly, warning me again. The hollow doesn't forgive curiosity. I learned that dozens had disappeared over decades, their bodies never found, only whispers remaining in the wind. That night, I returned to the cabin. The whispering began before I even set foot in the clearing. This time, I recorded everything. The shadows became more defined, moving unnaturally, crouched in the fog, observing. Suddenly, something brushed past my shoulder. I spun, but there was nothing. Only the symbols on the cabin walls seeming to pulse faintly with light, as if alive. The whispers merged into one voice, repeating my name, beckoning me into the forest. I realized the hollow wasn't just haunted, it was sentient. It communicated through whispers, shadows, and the wind, shaping reality itself to test and torment intruders. Fear and fascination battled inside me. I knew the hollow could claim me at any moment, yet I couldn't leave. Something compelled me forward, deeper into the snow-laden forest, toward its unknown heart. Deeper in the forest, the air grew heavier, almost viscous. The snow beneath my boots seemed to thicken unnaturally, swallowing my steps. The whispers became clearer, forming sentences. Follow, understand, join. I stumbled upon a frozen pond, its surface perfectly smooth, reflecting the pale moonlight. The figure emerged, hovering above the ice, tall, shadowy, faceless. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to step back, but the ground beneath me shifted subtly, forcing me closer to the pond. Then, the ice cracked, a hollow sound echoing through the forest. From beneath, faint faces pressed against the underside, distorted and twisted, screaming silently. The shadow extended a limb, or something resembling a limb, toward me. It was inviting me, or perhaps warning me. My rational mind screamed to run, but an inexplicable pull rooted me in place. I turned on my camera and recorded. Everything, the whispers, the shadow, the ice was captured. Yet even in playback, the faces beneath the pond were invisible. Only the cold dread remained, palpable, lingering. I ran, crashing through the thick forest, but the hollow wasn't letting me leave. Trees shifted positions, fog thickened, muffling my footsteps. The whispers followed, echoing my name, taunting me. Finally, I stumbled back to the cabin. The symbols on the walls were gone, replaced with scratches forming a single message. You are chosen. My camera's footage glitched, showing glimpses of my own face among the shadowy figures, as though the forest itself was absorbing me into its memory. Panic overtook me. I grabbed my gear and fled toward the town, ignoring the cold that cut through my clothes like knives. The hollow was aware. It wasn't just watching. It was marking me, recording me, planning its next step. Every whisper, every shadow, every movement of the wind was orchestrated to trap me in its story. That night, I locked myself in my rented cabin, unable to sleep, every noise amplified by fear. The hollow was patient. It would wait. And it would return for me if I let my guard down. Days passed, but the whispers never ceased. Even indoors, I heard them faintly, carried by the wind through cracks in the walls. Sometimes they weren't words, just sorrowful cries, echoing across the snow-laden town. I tried leaving Raven's Hollow for good, but every path seemed longer, the forest stretching unnaturally to prevent escape. At night, shadows followed me into town streets, lingering behind buildings, crouched atop rooftops. I realized then that the hollow wasn't confined to the forest. It extended into the town, blending into normal life, invisible yet always present. The locals knew and avoided it, but outsiders were never safe. One evening, I heard a scream echoing across the forest and lake. I ran, thinking someone was in danger, but there was nothing. Only footprints leading back into the hollow, vanishing halfway through the snow. It became clear. The hollow collected souls, memories, and fear, whispering to them eternally. I was next if I stayed too long, too curious. I returned to the forest one last time, desperate to understand, and found the pond frozen solid. The faces beneath the ice were gone, replaced by faint scratches spelling my name. The figure appeared again, taller, darker, moving with unnatural grace. The whispers became words I understood. Stay, join us, belong. My heart raced. I backed away slowly, and the ice beneath me groaned. A single crack split the pond's surface, yet nothing fell through. The figure didn't advance. It watched, patient. I realized then the hollow didn't need to attack. It trapped with fear alone. I ran back to town, my camera recording every step, though playback revealed nothing supernatural, only snow, trees, and me, alone, exhausted, terrified. I left Raven's Hollow the next morning. The town seemed peaceful, but I knew the hollow persisted, unseen, whispering in the wind, marking those who dared enter. Even now, miles away, I hear whispers in the wind when snowstorms roll in. My dreams are filled with twisted shadows, the pond beneath the ice, and the hollow, patient gaze of faceless figures. I've tried to tell others, but people laugh, dismissing it as paranoia. Yet the hollow is real. Every disappearance in the town, every vanished traveler, is proof. It exists not just to scare, but to consume curiosity and fear. I avoid forests, ice-covered lakes, and especially places that feel empty yet alive. But the hollow remembers. It recalls every face, every name. And sometimes, I swear I feel its presence even indoors. I never intended to become part of its story. But the hollow is patient. It will wait, whispering, until it can pull me back. The hollow didn't claim me that winter, but it marked me forever. I hear whispers whenever I close my eyes, echoes of shadows moving through snow-laden trees, reminding me that it is patient, intelligent, and ever-present. Some nights, I feel drawn back, a compulsion I cannot resist. I fight it, knowing that to step into the hollow is to enter a world where time and space twist, where shadows are alive, and where the forest itself keeps a record of trespassers. I warn everyone now. Raven's Hollow is not just a forest, it's alive. It watches, it waits, and it whispers names in the wind. Curiosity is dangerous here. Those who enter may never return the same or at all. And though I have escaped, a small part of me still belongs to the hollow. Its whispers a permanent echo in my mind. I know it will never forget me, and maybe one day it will call me back. My name is Elena, and this happened during the dead of winter in a remote town called Frostbite Ridge. I had come to photograph the northern lights, expecting breathtaking auroras and quiet solitude. What I found instead was something far more sinister. The town was nearly deserted, its few residents wary and secretive. They spoke in hushed tones about the ridge above the town, an area where travelers disappeared, lights flickered in the sky without explanation, and the cold seemed almost unnatural, as if it had a mind of its own. On my first night, I hiked toward the ridge with my camera gear. The snow crunched underfoot, and the auroras shimmered overhead. But then I noticed strange lights below the ridge, flickering in patterns that made no sense. At first, I assumed they were distant houses or lanterns. As I approached, the lights vanished, snuffed out like candles. But I could hear soft footsteps crunching behind me in the snow. I spun around, but the forest was empty, silent and oppressive. A chill ran down my spine. Frostbite Ridge had noticed me, and it wasn't going to let me leave unobserved. I tried to calm myself, blaming nerves and exhaustion. But as I continued up the ridge, the flickering lights returned. Closer now, dancing along the snow in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost intelligent. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath hung in the air, forming icy tendrils that twisted unnaturally. The snow beneath my boots began to feel unstable, almost like it wasn't solid. I realized I was being guided or lured by the lights. Then I saw something that froze me in place. Footprints appearing in the snow in front of me, glowing faintly blue. I hadn't made them. They led toward a cluster of dark pine trees, disappearing into the shadows. A whispering voice called my name, carried on the wind, soft and melodic, yet hollow. Come. Closer. My camera battery flickered. The lights reflected strangely on the lens, revealing shadowy figures crouched between the trees, watching, waiting. I wanted to run, but my feet refused. I felt trapped in a moment that stretched unnaturally, the ridge alive, aware, and intent on keeping me there. I tried to leave, but every step toward the town felt like wading through thick water. The lights moved with me, flickering ahead, then vanishing, then appearing again. The wind carried whispers in a language I didn't understand, but the tone was clear. Warning, command, and invitation all at once. Suddenly, the snow ahead rippled, as if breathing. Figures emerged from the shadows, tall and thin, almost translucent, their eyes glowing faintly. They didn't move like humans. They drifted, sliding across the snow as though gravity didn't fully bind them. I raised my camera, hoping to capture evidence. The figures paused, turning toward the lens, their glowing eyes piercing. Then the lights flickered out, plunging everything into darkness. I was alone, yet I felt watched from every direction. I realized Frostbite Ridge was sentient. The ridge wasn't just a place, it was a predator, observing, shaping reality to lure travelers into its grip. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, feeling a tugging sensation, like the snow itself wanted to pull me toward the ridge's heart. I knew then that leaving wasn't a simple matter of walking away. Night deepened, and the ridge transformed. Snow-laden pines twisted into impossible shapes. Shadows stretched and moved independently of the lights. The whispers grew louder, chanting my name, calling me to follow. I spotted a faint light on a distant ledge. Hoping for safety, I moved toward it. But the snow shifted beneath me, creating illusions of paths that didn't exist. Every turn led me back toward the ridge's center. Then I saw them. Dozens of glowing orbs hovering over the snow, like lanterns floating without strings. Inside each orb, a faint silhouette of a person, frozen, terrified, eyes wide. I recognized some faces from the town archives, missing hikers, explorers, even locals who vanished years ago. The lights pulsed, and the whispers became intelligible. Join us. Become part of the ridge. My heart raced. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the ridge's hold was absolute, its intelligence ancient, patient, and hungry. I barely stumbled back, clutching my camera, the lights receding as I scrambled down the slope. But I knew the ridge had marked me, and the lights would follow me, in shadows, in dreams, in the wind. By dawn, I was exhausted, trembling from the cold and fear. The ridge seemed normal in daylight, serene, deceptively beautiful. Snow sparkled under the weak sun, and the pine trees appeared ordinary, masking the horrors of the night. I reviewed the footage. The glowing orbs and humanoid figures didn't appear on video, though the audio recorded faint whispering. I realized the ridge wasn't only supernatural, it was selectively visible, hiding its horrors from instruments while tormenting the mind directly. Later, I spoke with a local historian. He told me that Frostbite Ridge had claimed lives for generations. Those who ventured too far saw visions, lights, and figures that drove them mad or disappeared entirely. Few returned, and those who did were never the same. I left the ridge, but the lights didn't leave me. In every shadow, in every flicker of illumination, I sensed them watching, calculating, patient. They had recorded me, studied me, and one day, they might call me back. I realized then that some places in Alaska are alive, not with wildlife, but with awareness and hunger, ancient and inescapable. Frostbite Ridge was one of them. That evening, curiosity got the better of me. I returned to the base of the ridge, hoping to capture the mysterious lights on camera. The snow was eerily still, almost as if holding its breath. As night fell, the lights appeared again, this time more numerous, pulsing rhythmically, illuminating the twisted pines in ghostly green and blue. I followed cautiously, my breath forming spiraling clouds in the freezing air. Suddenly, the snow shifted beneath me, forming a staircase-like slope leading toward a cliff edge. The lights hovered above, beckoning. Whispering voices urged me closer, seductive and melodic. See, understand, join. Fear clashed with fascination. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But part of me wanted to know what lay at the ridge's heart. The ridge itself seemed alive, reshaping paths and guiding me toward the lights. As I climbed, shadows moved at the edge of my vision, darting between trees. I knew the ridge was watching, marking every movement, learning my fears, and preparing me for the ultimate choice. Leave and be haunted forever, or cross and become part of it. I reached the cliff's edge, and the light suddenly exploded in brilliance, blinding and beautiful. For a brief moment, I saw the entire ridge as it truly was, a labyrinth of ice, shadows, and pulsating energy, stretching impossibly far in all directions. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the brilliance vanished, leaving only darkness and whispers. The voices shifted tone, urgent now. Decide. My legs shook. My hands froze around the camera. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the ridge, humanoid yet formless, its glowing eyes fixed on me. It didn't speak, but projected a presence, an unspoken warning. and perhaps a promise. The lights flickered toward me, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. I realized the ridge wasn't just a location, it was a living intelligence. It absorbed attention, curiosity, and life force, storing memories of every visitor, every fear, every soul that wandered too close. I took a trembling step back. The wind rose, carrying a cacophony of whispers, thousands of voices, trapped, echoing in the night. Frostbite Ridge had chosen to test me, and I had passed. For now, I descended quickly, every snowdrift and pine tree seeming to shift to block my path. The ridge's whispers followed me, soft yet omnipresent, replaying memories of others who had vanished. Halfway down, I stumbled upon a small frozen stream, reflecting the faint aurora. In the ice, I glimpsed faces, distorted, terrified, some human, some unidentifiable, twisting silently. I realized these were the ones who had failed the ridge's test, trapped forever in frozen memory. Panic surged, but I forced myself to keep moving. I could no longer distinguish between real and illusion. The ridge had a mind of its own, and I was a pawn in its ancient game. By the time I reached the base, the lights had vanished completely, leaving only the gentle rustle of wind and snow. I didn't stop running until the town came into view, exhausted and trembling. Even in safety, I knew the ridge had marked me. Frostbite Ridge had allowed me to leave, but it wouldn't forget. I would forever hear whispers in the wind and see flashes of light when the northern skies were clear. Back in town, I tried to warn locals about what I had seen. They only nodded silently, their eyes betraying fear and knowledge. They knew the ridge didn't forgive curiosity, but it sometimes let outsiders leave if it suited its purpose. That night, in my rented cabin, I swore I heard whispers echoing through the walls. Soft footsteps crossed the floor outside my door, vanishing when I turned the corner. The lights of Frostbite Ridge seemed to flicker faintly through the window, despite being miles away. The ridge wasn't confined to its location. Its influence stretched through memory, through fear, and through the mind. I realized I had become part of its story, the newest name whispered in the wind. Sleep came in fits, plagued by visions of lights, shadows, and frozen faces. I knew one day, if curiosity or recklessness overcame me, Frostbite Ridge would reclaim me, adding my fear to its eternal collection. Even now, I sense its presence in every northern storm, in every aurora that dances across the sky, reminding me that some places are alive, and some horrors are patient beyond imagination. I left Alaska soon after, but the nightmare never left me. Every night since, I hear the whistle at 11:15, sometimes faint, sometimes so close it rattles the glass. Once, I woke to find a train ticket on my nightstand, old, yellowed, with my name written in the same faded ink. Passenger, Samuel Price. I tried burning it. It never burned. The whispers have returned now, growing stronger whenever I'm near train stations or hear metal on metal. It's as if the rails themselves remember me, as if the dead conductor still waits patiently for me to board. I know that one night soon, when the clock hits 11:15, the sound won't just be in my dreams. I'll hear the doors open. I'll feel the cold air rush in. And I'll finally take the train that's been waiting for over 60 years. My name is Samuel, and this all began the winter I was assigned to document abandoned train stations across Alaska. Blackwood Station was my last stop, a forgotten outpost in the middle of endless snowfields, rumored to be haunted by those who vanished while waiting for trains that never arrived. The town nearby was practically deserted, and the few locals avoided the station, whispering about a phenomenon they called the silent tracks. According to them, anyone who lingered too long near the tracks would hear strange footsteps echoing across the frozen rails, yet see no one. And sometimes, trains appeared out of nowhere, with lights glowing, but no passengers inside. I arrived just before sunset, the wind cutting through my coat like knives. The station loomed ahead, wood splintered and windows shattered, snow piled high against the walls. I set up my camera, hoping to catch the auroras above, unaware that the night would reveal something far darker. As the sun disappeared behind jagged mountains, I noticed faint footprints on the snow-covered tracks. They were too fresh, too human, but led to nowhere. The air was unnaturally still, yet I could swear I heard movement behind me. I turned my flashlight toward the tracks, nothing but snow and darkness. The silence was so heavy it felt alive, pressing against my chest. Inside the station, time had frozen decades ago. Rusted ticket machines, torn posters, and an old bench still bore the carvings of names long gone. I brushed snow from a wooden sign that read, Platform 1, Anchorage Line, though the line had been shut down since 1963. That's when I heard it, a train horn, distant at first, echoing through the valley. My heart skipped. No trains had passed through here in over half a century. I ran to the platform, camera ready. The horn grew louder, followed by the rhythmic clank of wheels on metal. But the tracks were empty. I aimed my camera toward the darkness, and through the lens, I saw it. A faint outline of a train, glowing blue, moving silently through the snow. When I lowered the camera, it was gone. Only the echo of its passage remained. Shaken, I retreated inside, trying to convince myself it was an optical illusion caused by the cold. I replayed the footage. The screen flickered, distorted, then froze. For a split second, I saw faces pressed against the invisible train windows. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the waiting hall. A single footstep, then another, the echo of boots across old wooden floors. I turned on my flashlight. No one. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The light flickered, and for a moment I saw a breath, not mine, hanging in the cold air beside me. Then came the sound of a ticket being torn, faint but unmistakable, followed by a whisper that made my blood run cold. "You're late." The words weren't angry. They were disappointed. I backed away slowly, every nerve in my body screaming to leave. But something stronger, a morbid curiosity, kept me rooted in place. Outside, the wind began to howl, carrying with it the faint, rhythmic clank of a train approaching again. I ran outside to the platform again. This time, snow swirled violently around me, though the wind had stopped. The lights from the ghostly train appeared once more, but closer. The headlights pierced the dark like twin suns. The train slid silently into the station, doors hissing open, though no one stepped out. The interior glowed faint blue, and I could make out silhouettes, passengers frozen in their seats, motionless, their faces pale and distorted. The urge to look closer overpowered fear. I stepped forward, snow crunching beneath my boots, and peered through the window. The nearest figure turned its head. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine, and its mouth twisted into a slow, impossible grin. The door opened with a screech. A voice, echoing from nowhere, said softly, "All aboard." My body froze. I dropped the camera and stumbled backward, breath fogging in panic. The air around the train shimmered as though bending reality itself. Then, the train vanished again, not fading, but snapping out of existence like a light being switched off. My heart was racing as I grabbed my camera from the snow. I needed to leave. But when I turned toward the town, the path was gone. The entire landscape beyond the station was pitch black, swallowed by shadow. Only the tracks remained visible, stretching endlessly into the darkness. Then came the footsteps again. Behind me, synchronized with the echo of a train that wasn't there. I swung the flashlight around and froze. A conductor stood at the far end of the platform, wearing a uniform straight out of the 1950s. His skin was pale gray, his eyes sunken. "Sir," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally, "the 11:15 is late." "You shouldn't be here after midnight," I stammered. There's no train here." He tilted his head, and the air grew icy. "There is if you listen." And then he simply vanished, leaving behind a single train ticket fluttering to the ground. The ticket read, "Blackwood to nowhere, passenger, Samuel Price." The name on the ticket made my blood turn to ice. I hadn't told anyone my last name. My flashlight dimmed, sputtering with static interference. The wind began to hum, a mechanical, rhythmic sound like rails vibrating. I realized the sound wasn't from outside. It was beneath me. The entire station trembled softly. Dust fell from the beams as if something massive were passing below. I ran to the door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Outside, the tracks glowed faintly red now, steam rising from the snow. A low whistle echoed again, closer, more distorted. Through the cracks of the platform boards, I could see motion, wheels turning under the ground. The ghost train wasn't gone. It was beneath the station. Then, one by one, spectral hands reached up through the snow, grabbing the edge of the platform, clawing toward the surface. Their voices merged in a single, desperate whisper. "Don't miss your train." I stumbled back into the waiting room, slamming the door behind me. The whispering continued outside, like hundreds of voices murmuring beneath the snow. The clock above the ticket counter ticked, 11:14, 1 minute before the conductor's warning. My hands shook as I pointed the camera toward the window. The reflection showed something impossible. Me, but standing on the tracks outside, staring in. The reflection moved, though I didn't. Its eyes glowed faint blue, its expression empty. The whistle blew again. 11:15. The floorboards shuddered. The windows burst inward, snow pouring through, and the lights went out completely. In total darkness, I heard the sound of doors opening, and the conductor's voice, faint and near. Final call for Samuel Price. A cold hand brushed my shoulder. I turned, but there was only fog. I bolted out the back door, plunging into knee-deep snow. The fog swallowed everything. The tracks, the town, the mountains. Only the station remained visible, flickering like a mirage. Behind me, the train appeared again, rolling silently beside me. Its windows glowed with pale faces pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. I ran faster, but the train matched my speed effortlessly. The conductor leaned out, his expression unchanged. "You're late, Samuel." Time to board the train's door opened beside me. Inside, I saw passengers, all frozen mid-motion, their eyes following me. I stumbled, fell into the snow, and when I looked up, the train was gone. Only my footprints remained. Except a second set followed mine, ending just behind me. I didn't turn around. I ran until my lungs burned and the station disappeared behind the fog forever. By sunrise, I reached a ranger outpost several miles away. The officer there looked alarmed when I mentioned Blackwood Station. He said, "That place burned down in 1963, killed everyone aboard the last train to Anchorage." I froze. But I was just there. He frowned. No one's been there in decades. I showed him my camera. The device was cracked, but one video remained. He played it silently, eyes widening. On the screen, a faint blue train rolled through the station. Passengers turned to face the camera, mouths open. Then the footage distorted, ending abruptly. He looked pale. "You need to leave this place. Now." Before I could reply, a faint whistle echoed from far outside, soft yet unmistakable. The officer's face drained of color. That sound shouldn't exist anymore. I left Alaska soon after, but the nightmare never left me. Every night since, I hear the whistle at 11:15, sometimes faint, sometimes so close it rattles the glass. Once, I woke to find a train ticket on my nightstand, old, yellowed, with my name written in the same faded ink. Passenger, Samuel Price. I tried burning it. It never burned. The whispers have returned now, growing stronger whenever I'm near train stations or hear metal on metal. It's as if the rails themselves remember me, as if the dead conductor still waits patiently for me to board. I know that one night soon, when the clock hits 11:15, the sound won't just be in my dreams. I'll hear the doors open. I'll feel the cold air rush in. And I'll finally take the train that's been waiting for over 60 years. My name is Riley, and I'll never forget the winter I spent near Silent Lake, a place so remote that it doesn't appear on most maps. I was hired by a research team to record underwater seismic activity after reports of mysterious tremors beneath the frozen surface. It sounded like a simple, peaceful assignment. I couldn't have been more wrong. The town beside the lake had fewer than 30 residents. They kept to themselves, warning me not to stay out past dark. An old trapper told me, "The lake isn't quiet at night, son." It listens. I laughed it off. But on my first night, I understood what he meant. As I set up my equipment on the frozen shore, I heard it, a low, deep rumble beneath the ice, like the growl of something enormous moving far below. The vibration rippled through the surface, shaking the air. Then came a sound that didn't belong, a faint tapping, like knuckles on glass, echoing beneath my boots. I leaned down, pressing my ear to the ice. The tapping stopped, and something tapped back. The next morning, I reviewed my recordings. Every sensor had captured the vibrations, but none of the local scientists could identify their source. One of them, Dr. Howard, half-jokingly said, "Maybe it's something alive down there." That night, I returned alone to the lake to collect more data. The cold bit into my skin and the silence was suffocating. I set my flashlight down, its beam cutting across the endless sheet of ice. Then, a dark shadow passed underneath. It wasn't a fish or debris, it was massive. The shadow moved slow, circling beneath me, leaving trails of bubbles frozen mid-rise. I backed away, heart pounding, and then, thud! The ice cracked just a few feet ahead. Something hit it from below. Once, twice. My flashlight flickered, and I swear I saw a pale shape press against the ice, something with too many fingers. Reaching upward, I sprinted back to the cabin. The locals were waiting, faces grim. The trapper, old Samuel, pulled me aside. "You looked into the lake, didn't you?" he whispered. "You shouldn't have." He told me the story of a research team from 20 years ago. All of them vanished after drilling into the lake bed. "The ice sealed up," he said, "but the thing they woke up never went back to sleep." I wanted to dismiss it as folklore, but my instruments didn't lie. The tremors had a pulse, rhythmic, alive, like a heartbeat buried in the deep. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside carried faint sounds, knocking, slow, patient, deliberate. I looked toward the lake and saw small cracks snaking toward the shore, like veins spreading from a wound. By the fourth night, I'd stopped feeling the cold. The air was thick, heavy, filled with static. My radio kept picking up strange distortions. When I played them back, I heard whispers. Not random noise, words. It was saying my name. Riley. I froze. I hadn't told anyone about my recordings. My heartbeat raced as I checked the frequency. It wasn't coming from any local tower. It was coming from beneath the ice. That's when the power went out. Every light in the cabin died, leaving only the flicker of my dying fire. Outside, something moved. I could see the snow shifting, like something crawling just under the surface, circling the cabin. I tried to call for help, but the radio emitted nothing but static, and the whispering grew louder. Then, from the frozen lake, came a cracking boom that shook the ground. I rushed to the window and saw a massive hole forming in the ice. Steam rose from it, glowing faintly red. I ran outside against every instinct. As I neared the lake, I saw something emerging from the hole, pale, glistening flesh, like the back of a whale, but covered in veins that pulsed with light. Then I saw an eye, black and endless, opening right beneath me. It blinked, and the ice beneath my feet shattered. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the shore, soaked and freezing. My equipment was gone. The hole in the lake had sealed itself again, perfectly smooth, as if it had never broken. When I stumbled back into the cabin, Samuel was waiting by the door. He stared at me in silence. "It let you go," he muttered, "but it won't forget." He handed me a map and told me to leave before sunrise. The thing doesn't like being watched. That night, I packed. But as I loaded my gear, I noticed something. My reflection in the window wasn't moving when I did. Panic set in. I turned away from the glass, and the reflection smiled. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lantern. The flame hissed out. For a moment, the world was pitch black. Then, from behind me, I heard breathing. Wet, ragged breathing. When I spun around, nothing. Just the sound of dripping water. I realized it wasn't raining. It was coming from me. My clothes weren't wet anymore, but my skin was. A thin layer of frost formed along my arms, crawling upward. I could feel something moving inside the veins beneath my skin. Something cold, alive. I stumbled into the snow, gasping, clawing at my arms. The lake behind me shimmered faintly, rippling though frozen. A whisper echoed in the wind, not from outside, but from inside my head. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was a call, like it wanted me back. My body went numb, my mind foggy. I don't remember falling, only waking up hours later, miles from the lake, lying near the town's welcome sign. My skin was raw and blistered, and on my wrist were marks, tiny circular impressions like sucker scars. I left Alaska the next day. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. But as my truck rolled down the icy road, I glanced back in the mirror. The lake was gone, replaced by a vast field of snow. No reflection, no shimmer, nothing. Back home, I checked my recordings. Most were blank, except one. A faint sound beneath static. Tapping. Then a voice, distant and wet. "You looked into me. Now I look into you." I shut my laptop. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the tapping from inside my skull. It's been months. Doctors say my constant migraines are stress-related, but I know better. Last night, I woke to find frost on my pillow and the faint sound of dripping water from under my bed. When I looked, there was a thin patch of ice spreading across the floor, and beneath it, movement. The same tapping. Slow, patient, getting louder. The thing from Silent Lake never forgot me. And now, I think it's found a way through. I'm a traveling photographer. I spend most of my time on the road, chasing sunsets and forgotten towns. But last month, I found something I can't explain. A motel room that, according to every record I checked later, doesn't exist. It started when I was driving through rural Nevada, running low on gas and sleep. A flickering neon sign caught my eye through the desert fog. Rest Easy Motel, vacancy. It looked abandoned, but exhaustion won. Inside the lobby sat an old man behind a cracked counter, motionless as if frozen in time. Without looking up, he slid a key toward me, room 9, and whispered, "You'll want to keep your doors shut after midnight." The room looked ordinary. Stale air, faded wallpaper, faint smell of dust. But what unsettled me was the door opposite mine. Room 10. Its number was scratched off, and a single padlock hung from it, rusted shut. When I asked the old man about it, his expression changed. "We don't rent that one," he said. "It's occupied." That night, sleep wouldn't come. The walls seemed to hum with a low vibration, like distant machinery deep underground. I checked the clock. 12:07 a.m. That's when I heard it, a faint knock. It came from room 10. 3 soft taps, then silence. I waited, thinking maybe it was wind or pipes expanding from the cold. But then the knocking came again, this time harder, desperate. Someone was inside. "Hello?" I called out through the thin wall. "Do you need help?" No answer, just breathing. Slow, ragged, and close enough that I could feel the air shift through the cracks. I peered out the window. The lot was empty. The old man's car was gone. The only light came from the flickering motel sign outside. Then the handle of room 10's door began to twitch, back and forth, slowly, then violently. And in the silence between each rattle, I heard a whisper, muffled, pleading, and unmistakably human. "Don't open the door." I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but curiosity, or stupidity, won. I opened my door slightly, just enough to peek into the hallway. The air was colder there. I could see my breath. Room 10's padlock dangled loose, swaying gently. Someone, or something, had broken it. The door stood ajar. A thin light spilled from inside, flickering like candlelight. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. The smell hit me first, mold, rust, and something faintly metallic. "Blood?" I whispered. "Hello?" The light went out. Complete darkness. Then came a sound that will haunt me forever. The creak of floorboards as someone stepped out of the room. I stumbled backward, slamming my door shut. My breathing turned shallow. The sound stopped right outside my door. A pause. Then a long, slow drag, like fingernails sliding across wood. And then 3 knocks. This time, on my door. I backed away, trembling. The knocks came again. 3 sharp hits, loud enough to shake the handle. "Who's there?" I shouted. "What do you want?" Silence. Then the faint hum of static, like an old radio trying to tune in, filled the room. My phone, which I'd left on the nightstand, turned on by itself. The screen glitched, flashing numbers over and over. 1010, 1010, 1010. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my camera, flicked on the flashlight, and shined it toward the door crack. A shadow stood there, too tall, its head tilted unnaturally sideways. "Go away." I yelled. The shadow didn't move. But slowly the door handle turned, not with force, but with deliberate intent. Then, from behind the door, that same rasping whisper, "You shouldn't have stayed in room 9. The lights flickered once, twice, and went black. When the lights came back, everything was quiet. The shadow was gone. I grabbed my coat and camera, ready to leave. But when I stepped outside, everything had changed. The neon sign was still there. But now the letters spelled something different. Instead of Rest Easy Motel, it read, Stay Forever. I thought my mind was playing tricks. I turned to look for my car, but the parking lot was gone. In its place stretched an endless, snow-covered highway, disappearing into fog. No town, no horizon, no sound. Panic gripped me. I ran toward the road, but the more I ran, the farther away the motel looked, until it suddenly appeared right in front of me again. I was trapped. Back inside, the front desk was empty. The old man's chair still creaked, slowly rocking on its own. Behind the counter, a guest book lay open. Every entry read the same name, written in trembling handwriting. Room 9. I flipped through the guest book. Every page was dated, but each one jumped years apart. 1978, 1989, 2003, 2020. Every signature was mine. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I saw the old man standing behind the counter. Only this time, his face wasn't right. Half of it pale as ash, the other half cracked like glass. Room 9 always comes back, he said. You checked in long ago. I bolted toward the exit. But when I opened the front door, it didn't lead outside. It opened into room 10. The same smell, the same flickering light. Something moved inside, a shape sitting on the bed. My camera flickered to life, unprompted, taking rapid pictures. Each flash illuminated more of the room, until I realized the figure sitting on the bed was me. The flash from my camera went off again, and the other me on the bed smiled. It wasn't my smile. The walls began to warp, wallpaper melting like wax. My camera shook in my hands, clicking on its own. Every photo it took showed something different. The motel hallway, the lobby, the road, all empty, except for one figure standing in the distance each time. Me. The air thickened, heavy with rot and static. The sound of the old man's voice echoed faintly through the walls. You took room 9's place. My double stood up, moving toward me in jerky, unnatural steps. Its eyes were completely black. I dropped the camera and ran. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing me inside the darkness. When the lights flickered again, I wasn't in room 10 anymore. I was standing outside, but the motel was gone. Only my car remained, covered in frost. I jumped into the car, shaking, desperate to drive away. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. Relief flooded me, until I looked in the rearview mirror. Room 10's door was wide open again. Inside, standing perfectly still, was my double, watching me leave. I slammed the accelerator. The motel disappeared in the fog behind me. For hours I drove with no sense of direction until I finally saw headlights. A gas station. Civilization. Inside, the clerk blinked at me in confusion when I asked about Rest Easy Motel. There's no motel like that for 50 miles, he said. He looked down at my frost-covered jacket and frowned. You okay, man? You look like you've been out there for days. I checked my phone. No signal, no time, no battery. When I reached into my pocket for my car keys, I froze. They weren't mine. A small brass tag dangled from them, engraved in old lettering. Room 9. I left the gas station trembling trying to make sense of what happened. When I finally reached town, I checked every record I could find. Maps, property deeds, business listings. There had never been a motel called Rest Easy anywhere in the state. But the camera I'd dropped that night somehow ended up in my back seat. It was still on. Only one picture remained undeleted. It showed me standing in front of the motel sign. But the figure behind me, barely visible in the doorway of room 10, was my double, smiling, waving. The photo date read October 10th, 1978. And the strange thing is, that's the same year the old man's first guest book entry began. I still don't know if I ever really left that place. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint hum of neon lights. And sometimes, I wake up holding that brass key. It's been weeks since that night. Every day the world feels thinner. Like reality has edges I can almost see. Last night, I dreamt of the motel again. The sign flickered in the fog, whispering softly, "Check-in never ends." When I woke up, my car keys were gone. In their place sat a note, yellowed, burnt at the edges. It read, "Guest confirmed. Room 9 awaits." I tried to burn it, but the flame wouldn't catch. The paper stayed cold. Now, every mirror in my house shows me standing in that motel hallway, even when I'm nowhere near it. If you ever see a flickering neon sign in the middle of nowhere, don't stop. Don't look. Don't go inside. Because once you've checked into room 9, you never really check out. My name is Lauren, and I used to work as a snowplow operator along the remote routes near Dead Man's Pass, Alaska. A desolate stretch of highway known for its brutal storms and vanishing travelers. The name, people said, came from the dozens of lives the road had claimed over the decades. But the night everything changed. The snow was falling harder than I'd ever seen. My radio had died hours ago, and the blizzard howled so fiercely it felt like the wind itself was alive. Whispering, almost speaking. Then I heard it. Through the static hum of the storm came a voice. Faint, pleading, almost human. "Help me, please." I slammed the brakes. The plow screeched to a halt. Through the curtain of snow ahead, I saw movement. A shadowy figure stumbling across the road, half buried in white. I jumped out, yelling over the wind. "Hey, you okay?" The figure stopped, turning slowly toward me. It was wearing a snowplow uniform. My uniform. I froze. My headlights illuminated the figure's pale face, or what was left of it. Snow crusted across hollow cheeks and frost coated its eyelashes. It stared at me through eyes clouded like glass. It raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the forest. "They're calling," it whispered. Before I could react, the wind screamed and swallowed the sound. The figure stumbled backward into the blizzard, disappearing as if it had never been there. I rushed back into the cab, slamming the door shut and locking it. My breath came out in shaky clouds. I radioed dispatch again, nothing but static. Then, faintly, through the speaker, I heard that same voice. "Lauren, come back." My stomach turned. Nobody knew I was out there, except the station foreman, miles away. The radio crackled again. "You shouldn't have stopped." The snowplow's engine died. The lights flickered out. Outside, footsteps crunched slowly toward me. I sat frozen behind the wheel, gripping the steering column. The windshield was opaque with frost, but I could still see a faint shape moving just outside the beam of my dying headlights. Each step it took sounded heavier, deliberate. I reached for my flashlight, hand trembling, and pointed it out the side window. The figure was standing right beside the plow. Its hand rested on the metal, fingers blackened with frostbite. It stared at me with that same dead expression. Then, slowly, it raised its other arm and pressed its hand flat against the glass. The flashlight flickered, and suddenly there were two handprints on the window. One from inside, one from out. But I hadn't moved. I turned the key frantically, but the engine only coughed, then went silent again. And then, from behind me, from inside the cab, came the sound of snow crunching. I twisted around, flashlight shaking. The back of the cab was empty. My breath fogged the air. But I could swear I saw another cloud, one that didn't belong to me. Exhale right behind my shoulder. I swung the light toward the passenger seat. It was covered in frost, thick, glistening frost, as if something had been sitting there for hours. My radio screeched suddenly, loud enough to make me jump. Through the static came garbled voices, dozens of them, whispering all at once. Some crying, some laughing, others repeating my name. Lauren, Lauren, stay with us. I covered my ears, shaking my head, yelling for it to stop. And then, silence. When I looked up, I realized the plow's windshield had gone completely clear again. Outside, I could see faint lights, headlights, slowly approaching through the storm. Relief surged through me. Help. I jumped out of the cab, waving my arms. But as the vehicle drew near, my smile vanished. It was another snowplow, and I was the one driving it. I stumbled backward, my boots slipping in the snow. The other plow's headlights flickered, casting long, warped shadows. Through the glare, I saw a figure sitting behind the wheel. It looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same hair, same terrified expression. I screamed, but the sound was lost to the wind. The other me raised a hand and pointed toward the forest. Behind her, in the trees, dozens of faint blue lights began to flicker, like lanterns swaying in the wind. I felt an overwhelming pull toward them, a deep whisper in my mind saying, "Come back to the road. We've been waiting." My double smiled. Frost cracked down her cheeks like shattered glass. I turned and ran back into the plow, locking the doors again. But when I looked up, the forest was closer. The blue lights now shimmered just outside the windows, and one by one, they began moving toward me. The lights surrounded the plow like a silent army. Through the swirling snow, faint shapes emerged. Silhouettes of people, frozen mid-step, their skin pale and cracked with ice. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering one word over and over. "Stay." The glass fogged over from the cold as their faces pressed against it. Dozens of them, all mouthing my name. Then, all at once, the radio turned on again. "Lauren, it's dispatch. Where are you?" Relief surged through me. Oh, thank God. I'm stuck near Deadman's Pass. Something's out here. The voice on the radio paused, static then. The same voice whispered, softer now, right beside my ear. "I know. I'm right behind you." I turned. The passenger seat was no longer empty. Frost dripped from a pair of boots. And there, sitting beside me, was my frozen double, smiling. Her head tilted slowly toward me, cracking like ice splitting on a lake. "Why did you leave them?" she whispered. "They needed your help." I slammed the door open and stumbled out into the storm, blinded by snow. The figures were gone, the forest empty again. Only the howling wind remained. I ran down the road, boots crunching over ice, breath burning my throat. But no matter how far I went, The plow's headlights still glowed behind me, always the same distance away. The whispering voices followed, faint and mournful. "Turn back, Lauren, please." I finally fell to my knees, gasping. My flashlight flickered, illuminating something buried beneath the snow, the roof of a crashed snowplow. My snowplow. Through the cracked windshield, I could see my own body. Frozen, eyes wide open, one hand still gripping the radio. Her head tilted slowly toward me, cracking like ice splitting on a lake. "Why did you leave them?" she whispered. "They needed your help." I slammed the door open and stumbled out into the storm, blinded by snow. The figures were gone, the forest empty again. Only the howling wind remained. I ran down the road, boots crunching over ice, breath burning my throat. But no matter how far I went, the plow's headlights still glowed behind me, always the same distance away. The whispering voices followed, faint and mournful. "Turn back, Lauren, please." I finally fell to my knees, gasping. My flashlight flickered, illuminating something buried beneath the snow, the roof of a crashed snowplow. My snowplow. Through the cracked windshield, I could see my own body. Frozen, eyes wide open, one hand still gripping the radio. I woke up lying in a hospital bed, bright lights burning my eyes. My throat was raw, my body freezing. A paramedic stood beside me. "You were found unconscious near mile 42, he said. "Your snowplow must have gone off the road. You're lucky to be alive." I wanted to tell him what I saw, the voices, the figures, my own body frozen in the snow. But I couldn't find the words. Later that night, I overheard two nurses talking outside my room. "One more body recovered from Dead Man's Pass," one said. "Snowplow operator." ID says. Lauren Peters, my heart stopped. That was my name. I reached for the mirror beside the bed. My reflection looked pale. Too pale. Frost glimmered at the edge of my hair, and when I exhaled, I saw my breath. They released me 2 days later. I returned to the road, unable to stay away, hoping to find answers or proof that I wasn't insane. But when I reached Dead Man's Pass, the highway was gone. Nothing but untouched snow stretching for miles. Not a single tire track, not even the crash site. As the wind picked up, I heard them again. The voices, faint but unmistakable. "Lauren, come home." I dropped to my knees, crying into the snow. When I looked up, the plow's headlights flickered to life far in the distance, just like before. My double sat behind the wheel, smiling, hand raised in a slow, eerie wave. Now, every time a storm hits Dead Man's Pass, locals say they see 2 snowplows instead of 1. Both driving side by side, vanishing into the white. And sometimes, if you listen closely through the wind, you can still hear my voice calling for help. My name is Ryan, and I used to work as a researcher studying glacial formations near a remote Alaskan village called Nuvik Point. Population, 43. It sat at the edge of the frozen sea, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by endless sheets of ice. Locals warned me never to go near the ice caves after dark. They said the glacier wasn't dead, that something inside it moved when the temperature dropped below 0. I laughed it off at first. Science leaves no room for superstition. But that was before the night the ice began to hum. It started as a low vibration under my boots, like the earth itself was breathing. My flashlight flickered, and through the drifting snow, I saw something. A shape pressed inside the ice wall. At first, I thought it was a trick of light. But when I leaned closer, I realized I was looking into the frozen face of a man. eyes wide, mouth open mid-scream. And then, it blinked. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The beam danced across the wall of ice, but the face was gone. Just frost and cracks. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing inside my parka. When I told my colleague Tom, he laughed. "You've been awake too long, man. That place messes with your head." He wasn't wrong. I hadn't slept properly in 3 days. But something deep in my gut told me I wasn't imagining it. That night, the wind howled so loud, it shook the metal walls of our cabin. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound like scraping. Fingernails dragging against ice. I looked through the window, and my breath caught in my throat. Something tall, human-shaped, was standing by the glacier, its outline barely visible through the snow, unmoving, except for one small detail. It was facing our cabin. By morning, the storm had settled. Tom went out to check the equipment. He called for me after a few minutes, his voice trembling. I rushed outside and froze. In the snow, just a few feet from the cabin, were bare footprints. No boots, no tracks from animals, just human feet. Each print led toward the glacier. "Who the hell would walk out here barefoot?" Tom muttered. His face had gone pale. We followed the trail until it reached the same spot where I'd seen the figure. The ice there was cracked, as though something heavy had pressed against it from the inside. That night, Tom insisted we leave the site. "We'll come back when the weather clears," he said. But I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't alone. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of whispering, faint, muffled, coming from beneath the floorboards. When I pressed my ear to the wood, I heard it clearly this time. My own voice, whispering my name. I shot up, heart racing. Tom was snoring on the cot beside me, oblivious. I grabbed my flashlight and checked under the floor. Nothing but frozen soil. Yet I could still hear the faint echoes of that voice, the exact tone and rhythm of my own speech. I stayed awake until sunrise, staring at the glacier through the fogged window. That's when I noticed it. A crack stretching across the ice face. Overnight, it had widened, jagged and deep, like the glacier itself was splitting open. Tom wanted to leave immediately, but the snowmobiles wouldn't start. Their engines were frozen solid. We were stuck. Around noon, we heard a radio signal. Static at first, then a faint transmission. "Help, trapped under the ice, please." The voice was mine. Tom stared at the radio, shaking his head. "That's impossible. You're standing right here." But the voice kept repeating, louder each time, until it distorted into a growl that rattled the walls. Then, silence. We spent the next hours barricading the cabin. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every creak of ice outside made my blood run cold. That evening, the temperature dropped to -40. The generator flickered out, plunging us into total darkness. Tom lit a lantern and moved toward the window. "Something's out there," he whispered. His breath fogged the glass. I followed his gaze and saw it. A tall, gaunt silhouette pressed against the ice wall just a few meters away. I could see its outline through the frosted window, its head tilting slowly from side to side, studying us. Tom raised the lantern higher. "Maybe it's a trick of the..." Before he could finish, a hand, pale, blue, and human, slammed against the window from the outside. The glass spiderwebbed with cracks. The hand dragged down, leaving streaks of frozen blood. Tom screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over the lantern. The flame flickered, but didn't die. I rushed to the window. The hand was gone. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. Everything was silent, heavy, suffocating. We armed ourselves with what we could, a flare gun and an ice axe. "We make for the village," Tom said. "Now." The moment we opened the door, a blast of freezing air hit us. And then, movement. Something was crawling under the ice, moving fast, circling us. The ground vibrated beneath our boots. Tom fired a flare into the darkness. The red glow illuminated the glacier ahead, and there, half buried in the ice, were hundreds of faces. Men, women, all screaming, eyes open, preserved like ancient statues. And one of them was Tom. He dropped the flare, his face twisting in horror. That's not. The ground split open beneath him. Tom vanished into the crack with a scream that echoed into the storm. I dropped to my knees, shouting his name. Only silence answered. Then, faintly, from deep below, came a sound. Knocking. 3 slow knocks, like something was striking the ice from underneath. Then, in a voice that wasn't human anymore, Tom whispered, "Ryan, help me." I backed away, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to run. But I couldn't leave him. I aimed my flashlight down the fissure and froze. Something was climbing out. Not Tom. Not anymore. Its skin was gray-blue, stretched thin over a distorted frame. Ice shards jutted from its back like broken glass. And yet, beneath all that horror, I could still recognize his eyes. He opened his mouth, frost falling from his lips, and said, "You shouldn't have looked." I ran. The wind howled like it was alive, chasing me across the tundra. Behind me, I heard its voice, Tom's voice, calling my name again and again, growing distorted, inhuman. The village lights appeared faintly in the distance, a cluster of cabins barely visible through the white haze. My lungs burned. My legs went numb. But I didn't stop until I reached the nearest house. A woman opened the door, her face pale with confusion. "You shouldn't be out here," she said, pulling me inside. When I told her what I'd seen, she crossed herself. "That glacier's cursed," she whispered. "They say it keeps what it takes." "Shows you what you fear most," I stared out her window. The glacier loomed in the distance, faint blue under the moonlight. And there, just for a second, I saw movement, a shadow standing at the edge, watching. It looked exactly like me. I stayed in that village for 3 days, refusing to sleep. The locals warned me not to leave at night, that sometimes the dead walk across the frozen plain, calling out for warmth. On the 3rd night, I heard it again. The knocking. It came from beneath the floor of the cabin. Slow, steady, 3 taps. I froze. Then a whisper, my voice again, from outside the door. "Let me in, Ryan. You left me there." The woman I stayed with began to cry softly, rocking back and forth. "Don't open the door," she whispered. "Whatever you do, don't answer it." The knocking grew louder. The doorknob began to turn. I grabbed the rifle from the wall and fired through the wood. Silence. When I looked through the bullet hole, there was no one outside. Only footprints, leading back toward the glacier. I left Alaska 2 days later on the first plane out of Nuvik Point. I told no one the full story, just that my partner died in an avalanche. But I can't escape it. Every night since, I hear the same sound, faint through the walls of my apartment. 3 slow knocks, then my voice whispering, "You shouldn't have looked." A week ago, I received a parcel in the mail. No return address. Inside was a block of cloudy ice, sealed tight in plastic. My name is Ethan. I used to be a late-night radio host in a small Alaskan town called Black Ridge, population barely 400. The town sat deep between frozen valleys, where nights stretched for 20 hours and the cold could silence even wolves. I worked the midnight shift at KBAR 103.6, a small community station that mostly played old rock and weather updates. But one night, something strange happened. Something that made me quit radio forever. It started at 12:47 a.m. I was alone in the booth, sipping cold coffee, when I noticed the on-air light flicker. Static filled the line, followed by a faint voice I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was interference, but the voice began to speak directly to me. "Ethan, don't go outside tonight." My hands froze on the soundboard. I hadn't said my name on air. Then the transmission continued, calm, monotone, echoing like it came from a tunnel. "They're already here?" I leaned closer to the mic, trying to steady my voice. This is KBAR 103.6. If you can hear me, please identify yourself." No reply, only static. Then, faintly through the noise, came a distorted whisper. "Don't let them in." Every hair on my arm stood up. I muted the mic, checked the transmitter, the audio feed. Everything looked normal. But when I turned back to the console, I froze. The studio clock, which had been at 12:49, was stuck. The second hand trembled, refusing to move. And that's when I noticed it. Faint tapping from the glass window behind me. Tap, tap, tap. I turned slowly. The snow outside was illuminated by the studio's red light, and through the fogged glass, I could see a silhouette. Someone was standing out there, perfectly still. The phone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the silence. When I picked it up, the same voice whispered again, this time directly into my ear. "Don't turn around." I dropped the receiver, heart pounding. Slowly, I turned back toward the window, but the figure was gone. The snow outside was untouched. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a trick of reflection, maybe exhaustion. But then I noticed something else. The microphone was still live. I hadn't touched it. And from the speakers, faintly, came breathing. Not mine. It was rhythmic, close, like someone was standing inches from the mic, exhaling softly. I killed the feed and sat frozen in silence. Then, creak. The studio door, which I had locked, began to open. Slowly, I grabbed the flashlight and shone it toward the doorway. Nothing. The hallway outside was pitch black, except for a faint red glow seeping from under the door of the recording booth, the one we hadn't used in years. On the old door, the light from my beam revealed something carved deep into the wood. "Stay inside." I stood frozen, staring at that glowing door. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor. My stomach turned. It was the transmitter. I returned to the control booth. The signal meter was spiking. Something, or someone, was broadcasting on our frequency. Through the static came a series of clicks and tones, like a coded message. Then, unmistakably, my own voice played through the speakers. "This is Ethan, KBAR 103.6. If you're hearing this, run." The audio cut. The feed switched automatically to the live camera view of the transmission tower. Just a few hundred feet from the building, there was someone up there. A figure perched halfway up the tower, motionless against the wind. And then, through the feedback, I heard whispering again. Not from the radio, from inside the walls. "You shouldn't have stayed after midnight." I stood frozen, staring at that glowing door. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor. My stomach turned. It was the transmitter. I returned to the control booth. The signal meter was spiking. Something, or someone, was broadcasting on our frequency. Through the static came a series of clicks and tones, like a coded message. Then, unmistakably, my own voice played through the speakers. "This is Ethan, KBAR 103.6. If you're hearing this, run." The audio cut. The feed switched automatically to the live camera view of the transmission tower. Just a few hundred feet from the building, there was someone up there. A figure perched halfway up the tower, motionless against the wind. And then, through the feedback, I heard whispering again. Not from the radio, from inside the walls. "You shouldn't have stayed after midnight." I ripped the main cable from the transmitter. Everything went silent. The static, the whispers, gone. Then I heard a faint knock. 3 times, coming from the hallway. When I opened the door, a cold draft swept in. The corridor lights were out, except for one, at the far end, flickering over the emergency exit. The red glow illuminated footprints in the snow that had blown in through a broken window. Bare footprints, leading away from the studio. I followed them outside into the howling wind. The footprints stopped at the base of the radio tower. Looking up, I saw something that froze me in place. There were 2 figures on the tower now. One was still and dark. The other, climbing higher, moved like a shadow, copying every motion of the first. When lightning flashed across the sky, I saw its face. It was mine. I stumbled backward into the snow, screaming into the storm. My breath came out in frantic clouds. The tower lights flickered, one by one, until everything went black. Then, from the darkness above, came the sound of 2 voices speaking in unison. "Broadcast must continue." I ran back toward the building, slipping on the ice. Inside, the emergency generator buzzed to life. All the equipment flickered on again by itself. The microphone glowed red. My chair turned slowly toward me. Through the speakers came a faint tune. One of the station's old theme songs from the 1980s. Warped, slowed, ghostly. Then I heard breathing again. Closer this time. From behind the glass booth. And standing there, inside the recording room, was me. Smiling. Wearing the same clothes. Holding the same mic. He leaned close to the glass and whispered, "Your shift is over." I froze. My reflection, my copy, tilted its head, then vanished as the lights flickered. The hum of the transmitter filled the silence again, rising to a painful pitch. Suddenly, the soundboard began broadcasting by itself. Random stations, overlapping screams, snippets of words that didn't belong to any language. I tried to shut it down, but the dials moved on their own. The red light above the mic blinked faster and faster, as if syncing to my heartbeat. Then, one clear voice cut through the chaos. "This is KBAR 103.6. This is the last broadcast." The door behind me slammed shut. The windows frosted over. My breath crystallized midair. Something moved in the booth again, not me, but something wearing my face. Its eyes were black, like burnt glass. It leaned into the mic and whispered, "Now everyone will hear." When I woke up, it was daylight. The equipment was dead, the clock frozen at 3:33 a.m. My car keys lay on the floor, half melted. I ran outside. The town was silent. Snow covered the roads, no footprints, no tire tracks, no sound of life. I reached the general store, the diner, the sheriff's office, all empty. Doors open, lights flickering, but no one there. And then I heard it. A faint voice carried by the cold wind, coming from a nearby radio. You're listening to K-Bar 103.6, broadcasting live from Black Ridge. It was my voice. The broadcast was still running, every radio in town tuned to the same signal, the same words, the same message. Over and over. Broadcast must continue. It's been 2 years since that night. They shut down KBAR and sealed the station after the rescue team found no one there. Just frozen equipment and one half-burned transmitter still running on emergency power. I moved south, changed my name, tried to forget. But the signal followed me. Sometimes, late at night, I'll turn on the radio just to hear static. But if I tune too far, I always find it. Channel 103.6. And there it is, my own voice, broadcasting the same loop. This is K-Bar 103.6. The broadcast must continue. A few weeks ago, someone mailed me a flash drive. No note, no return address. On it was a single audio file labeled finalshift.wav. When I played it, I heard breathing, then a voice identical to mine. Welcome back, Ethan. Your shift starts now. The power flickered. The red recording light on my desk turned on, and from the shadows behind me, I heard a chair creak.